Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahlan sahla. Allahumma ansur al-islam wal muslimin wa'adlu min fadlika rayat al-haqq wad din. Allahumma ansur ikhwanana fi Gaza. Allahumma ansurhum nasran 'aziza. Allahumma kun ma'ahum. Allahumma ayyidhum. Ya Allah, give support and victory to our brothers in Gaza and sisters in Gaza. Be with them at this time of need. And Ya Allah, we ask you to use us for this religion and for the support of the Ummah. And we ask you, Ya Allah, not to replace us. Assalamu alaikum once again. My name is Abdullah Saif. I'm the regional manager for MEND for Midlands and Wales. It's a big patch. And for those who don't know, MEND is an organisation, as Brother Nabil mentioned, which stands for Muslim Engagement Development. An organisation set up about 10 years ago with the sole aim of empowering the Muslim community through media and politics, to deal with the issue primarily of Islamophobia, to deal with the issue, the growing issue of how to deal with a community or a society that has unfortunately been growing in resentment and discrimination of the Muslim community. And an organisation like this is a fard kifaya really. An organisation like this, which is 100% community funded, which has its backing solely from the community, no government grants or anything like that, is a necessity for the Muslim community to have. And part of our engagement, like I said, is about empowering the Muslim community in the role of politics. And what we're seeing today, and what we've been living through the past 2 weeks, and the pain and the burden that we've all felt in our souls, deep in our hearts, for what's happening in Gaza, is primarily a political issue. There's still a lot of other things as well. There's the religious dimensions, there's humanitarian dimensions, all these things. And so, while the world kind of focuses attention on Gaza, and while our hearts and our du'as are for them, we need to first and foremost realize, before we even talk about what we can do or what we should do, is to realize that we need to shift our mindset to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost expects from me and you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not ask us if Masjid al-Aqsa was liberated by me or you. He will not ask us whether we were able to, unite the Muslim community or the Ummah or whatever it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask me and you, what effort did you do? What sa'i were you part of? Because after everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us on the day of judgment, وَكَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا, that your effort is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates. وَأَنَّ سَعْيُهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى, that every person will see the reward of their effort. So, as a mindset for our life really, we need to appreciate how is it that I can utilize this moment, and it doesn't have to be about this particular issue, about any issue, to show effort before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the results ultimately are with Allah. And this is why you're here today, and this is what we as an organisation are trying to kind of inspire within our community, to put some effort in. Now, I don't know what it is about Palestine, subhanAllah, and Quds. There are wildfires growing around the Muslim Ummah that we all know of, from Myanmar to Kashmir, to what's happening in Yemen, to Sudan, to all these other places. But subhanAllah, when Palestine comes calling, when Al-Quds comes calling, when Al-Aqsa comes calling, everyone seems to kind of put their flags down and raise the flag of Palestine. Everyone, it seems like to be the mothership cause, right? And everyone seems to be like, and you see the support from Jakarta to Yemen to Sudan to Colombia, all over the world. These past weeks, we've seen government buildings in the West decorated with the Israeli flag. But we've seen the streets of the world decorated with the Palestinian cause. And that says something about the dhamir and the consciousness of the world really, and where it really is. And while we get caught up with this agenda and that, bias and all these kind of things, with the structural powers, people are aware of where the haqq lies. They know it, and we see that they know it, but sometimes you have to push through, and this is what part of the effort is. So today's example, inshallah, presentation, and I've already started too long with the presentation introduction, but it's to kind of set the scene for what this is. This is going to be general advice. We've already presented this last week with Al-Duha, and tomorrow we're at Isa ibn Maryam. But this isn't about listening to specific cases that you're going to perhaps experience or perhaps experience. It's about general advice that inshallah we can kind of be mindful of whilst we do the effort of supporting our brothers and sisters in Palestine. So we simply know about, we all know the facts now about Gaza because we've been listening to the news so much. There's an area about the size of Birmingham, 2.2 million inhabitants, half of them are children or are youth, and that we know all this, the oppression that they're facing. What we need to do is how to voice our concerns properly and to support the cause. And I'm going to begin by setting the red lines. What we should never do when we're speaking about this cause is show support or public proclamations or anything like that for any prescribed group. For any prescribed group, such as Hezbollah, such as Hamas. The law in the UK has prescribed these groups, and it is a criminal offence for anyone to show support to these specific organisations. There's a list of them. But specific to this particular cause, anyone who shows support for these organisations has broken the law. Now, everybody here knows that the cause of Palestine is bigger than one group. The cause of resisting oppression and occupation is a general position that international law enshrines that you can do. So our support for the Palestinian cause is not an issue and should be shouted from the rooftops and should be supported and said publicly and with full zeal. But specifying this red line right at the offset is to make sure that we are aware of how at least we go about speaking about the Palestinian cause. So never support groups that are prescribed by name under UK law, such as Hezbollah, such as Hamas. Again, like I said, there's no right to express support for Palestine or the Palestinian people. Now, is that clear? That makes sense? Do you all know this? Yeah? Great. I'm going to say some names now before I go to the next slide. And tell me what's common about them. Noam Chomsky, Norman Finkelstein, Ilan Pape. If you know these names, what's common about them? They're all Jewish. And what's their position with the Palestine-Israel situation? They're pro-Palestinian, aren't they? And this takes me to the next slide. Do not attack Jews as a people. Avoid terms like Jews and the Jews and when criticizing the policies of the Israeli state. To attack Jews as a people and to hold them collectively responsible is anti-Semitism. And you're not hurting or saying anything against a religious community. You're saying something against a racial community. And the race laws in the UK are incredibly strong. When you discriminate against race, as the Jewish people are deemed, as the Sikhs are, and black people, and all these kind of things, but then the laws are incredibly strong and will come down on you. And anyone who is found to be violating these laws. And so doing any of this we have to be incredibly mindful of. We're talking about the Zionist state, we're talking about the Israeli state, we're talking about Israeli policies. We never talk about the collective Jewish position. I started this whole slide by saying that some of the leading supporters of Palestine and those who the Zionist community they deem as self-hating Jews, that's the kind of like the rhetoric that they throw at them, are incredibly brave people. Incredibly brave people. And there's also that Jewish group, the Orthodox, the Netori Carter. The Netori Carter. Who was at the demonstration on Saturday? Was anyone there? I was there. And 300,000 people also. the one in London, and the Notori Carter were there, and a lot of people want to take photos with them, but they've been consistent, and they've been telling people consistently that of the problems of the Israeli state. So this is how we do it. And now, as you know, there is incredible sensitivity when it comes to the issue of anti-Semitism. We shouldn't even get close to the line. Now, some people will try to blur the lines, but at least you know that in your rhetoric and in your discourse, you're never going about talking about this issue about as if it's a case of Jew or this issue versus the Jewish people. You're always talking about the Israeli state and the Zionist state. And these are the two red lines. It's not much. And I think we can all do it. And it takes a moment to think before you speak. But it's not hard. And if they're the only two things that you have to kind of be mindful of, then brothers and sisters, the road is clear ahead of us. Once you've gone past these, not even hurdles really, just that you're aware of these things. We have to hold and critique the Israeli state and anyone who kind of supports them. And when we do, this kind of expression is, we're living in the days of, in the age of rights. And the Article 10 of the 1998 Human Rights Act, it protects your freedom for political expression. You're allowed to say what you need to say against the policies of any government, your own government, a foreign government, absolutely no worries whatsoever. As long as that expression doesn't violate or threaten public safety. Now, I noticed some people already taking photos and stuff, and that's fine, but this is just a PowerPoint version of a PDF that you can find on the MEND website. I need to make that clear. So if you go to mend.org.uk, resources, there's a whole bunch of things there, inshallah, and maybe we can do some future ones, inshallah, in the masjid, about the LGBT issue and whatever it is. We've got a lot of guidance on a lot of things. But if you want, you can get this on there, so you don't need to take any photos, but just pay attention to what's being said. So, are you allowed to express your political thoughts? You are. And it's enshrined by law, and it's a fundamental right. Obviously there are lines, so you can't express support for a prescribed group like mentioned. Now, criticizing Israel, there's a whole bunch of slides now, not actually that much, but a few slides that we're going to cover about how it is that what you should do when you talk about the violation that Israel is committing, the abuses that they are. You're talking about the occupation of the Palestinian West Bank and Gaza. This is incredibly flagrant violation. Israel is the leading violator of international laws and resolutions, UN resolutions, about 78, I think. But they have such diplomatic cover that it means nothing when someone tries to hold them to account. And we've seen this. Now, for us to speak about our own government, and in fact one of the kind of leading critique of what's going on now is by a commentator called, I forgot his name, he's a Jewish man, who's always on a Good Morning, GB News, and some of you may have seen this clip, and he says, whenever they ask him about why is it you're always criticizing the UK government and Israel, and you're not saying anything about Hamas or anything like that, he says, as a government, as a UK taxpayer, our government is not paying for Hamas's weapons. And so whatever violations of human rights they're doing, that's on someone else's dime. But our money is going to pay for the military of Israel. So whatever war crimes they're committing, we are complicit. So I am saying we can't do this. It's a very bold, strong line, very genuine critique. You say it, absolutely fine. They won't like it, they'll push back. But the truth is the truth. We know about the separation war that's happening in the West Bank and how they split the country. We know the military control that effectively makes Gaza, and this phrase, open air prison, was something that David Cameron said. Remember David Cameron? Yeah. He said Gaza is an open air prison. This isn't our words, it's their words. When it's mentioned that Gaza is a concentration camp, there's usually a rebuttal from the Zionist side saying, well, you can't call it a concentration camp. What happened, the Holocaust was a concentration camp. They say, no, that's not what a concentration camp is. That was an extermination camp in the Holocaust. Yeah? And Gaza has been a concentration camp since 2015, where basically were able to concentrate a group of people in a limited space, controlling every avenue and everything about it. But now it is turning and has turned into an extermination camp. And it's incredible the language that's used and how they try to twist it. But not everyone's going to know this. And I'm not saying these are sound bites just for you to kind of be excited or something like this. But rather, like I said, these are general points. So to hold them to account about this is again something that we need to do. I'm talking about the disproportionate disadvantage that the Palestinians have in resisting this massive military juggernaut that is Israel. A nuclear state, although it tries to hide the fact that it is. With all the sophistication the world's military has to offer against people who are literally, banding things together to resist. Remember, resisting occupation is a fundamental right within international humanitarian law. It's so crazy that the law of war internationally is called international humanitarian law. It's like, who makes these things up? Yeah, we know humanitarian to be like giving charity and stuff like that. International humanitarian law is the law that decides and dictates how countries go to war and what they do in war. It's just a funny thing, but in that it says anyone who's occupied has the fundamental right to resist it, even with armed struggle. Even with armed struggle. And so, what the Palestinians are doing in repelling and pushing back and resisting, and they have been for all these decades, is enshrined. And this is the same clause and the same law that Ukraine uses. And many of us, no doubt, have been conscious of the blatant double standards and the hypocrisy. And you think you've kind of had enough of it. We've already seen it through the war on terror wars years and the duplicity and all that kind of stuff. But it still stinks the same. It still smells the same. The odor is still as netting and as disgusting as it is. And when you see it flagrantly. And what's crazy is when you see Ukraine, who are fighting a war, stating that this is an occupier, Russia that's coming to attack and we're defending. The same people who are occupied are supporting the Israeli side. Zelensky going there to support. In any case, this is just, it smacks of hypocrisy. You can talk about the war crime of collective punishment, where by definition, by their own language, they're saying we are going to flush out Hamas by destroying everything. Anything that moves, anything that houses a soul, anything that tries to walk, we're going to bomb it. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. This is how they are speaking about dealing with our brothers and sisters in Gaza. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And so you call it out, and they say it with so much audacity and so much, it's incredible. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, we're going to do a complete siege on Gaza like it wasn't sieged before. No electricity, no food, no water, no gas, and it's all closed. And everyone is calling it a war crime. There isn't anyone who tries to who can paint it in any other way. And the last point on this is to say that Israel is an apartheid state. And this term apartheid really kind of irks Western governments and Western communities because of its association with the kind of major historical apartheid state, which is obviously South Africa. Some of you have probably been to South Africa. And that's where you have one group of people providing themselves rights over the same land that everyone else has. And the only distinguishing feature why they give themselves supremacy is because of their racial status or their particular background. And this isn't language that we're using. This is international human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty, like the UN, saying that Israel is using these, having policies which are akin to apartheid. International, even Israeli human rights organizations like Beit Salim. These phrases, these types, this language, this is how we push back in this context, in this country. When we're speaking, I know a lot of us, we kind of live in our own echo chambers at times, and we're kind of speaking to each other and WhatsApping each other the same thing. And we're all on the same page, we're all on the same side. But when we're speaking if we ever get the chance to speak to a colleague, on the press, wherever it may be, then these points are things that you can kind of reach out to. Talking about war crimes, talking about international law, talking about context. Everyone seems, when you listen to mainstream media, they think that the Israel-Palestine conflict started 2 weeks ago. No contextualization. Everyone talking about whether Israel's attack on Palestinians right now in Gaza is proportionate or not. But no one is saying what a proportionate response from an occupied group for decades, what should a proportionate response look like? Because it's a case of trying to rewrite history, trying to kind of manipulate the narrative, all these kind of things. But what we're seeing now is a lot of spokespeople, a lot of people coming up. Many of us, whenever we see someone, an MP, whether it's in Ireland, whether it's in the European Union, wherever it is, or in European Parliament, standing up for the rights of the Palestinian people, standing up, we jump on them because we know that this is brilliant. We need to hear these voices. And we need to learn these narratives and these things. So these are general guidelines for the moment that I think everyone, inshallah, can agree with and know that this is how we conduct ourselves when we speak about Palestine, especially to the general masses. Again, this is a PDF that you can download on the MEND website, mend.org.uk, and you can check it out. Last week, there was a meeting with some Masajid community members with a bunch of senior people within Birmingham community. So we met the Chief Constable of the police, we met the West Midlands Mayor Andy Street, we met the Police and Crime Commissioner Simon Foster, we met the leader of the council, John Cotton. Each time trying to tell them, as Muslims in Birmingham, as Muslims here, we are not happy with their response. We don't think that they have shown any type of not impartiality, but fairness when they're addressing this issue. One of the things that we held them to account for was the issue of Palestine and schools. Last week I gave this talk, and my colleagues across the country have given this talk. And after the Q&A, parents put their hands up and say, you know what, in my kid's school this is happening, my kid's going this is happening. And everyone starts to pop up with questions saying, my kid's happening. I'm not here, this isn't a clinic for dealing with individual cases. Unfortunately, I'll signpost inshallah for people who can go out and support you. But this is some general advice now, moving on how to discuss this, especially in the case of schools. Now, schools are scared. Schools are scared, a lot of them, in dealing with this issue. Some of them are trying to fall under or hide behind the thing of impartiality, saying, listen, we want a safe school environment, nobody say anything, I'm not going to paint the rooms white and blue, I'm not going to paint them red, white, black and green, everybody be quiet. So, trying to kind of like just close their eyes, see no evil, hear no evil, all that kind of stuff. Which is totally not what a school is for. A school is a place of nurturing critical thinking, of preparing children for the outside world, of making sure that they have a safe space to say what needs to be said and hone how they say it, teach them. And we've seen incredible examples in some schools of trying to kind of do this, having assemblies, having forms classes, bringing speakers in, all these kind of things. Brilliant. But a lot of schools are scared. Now, this is general advice. And by the way, at that meeting last week, when we agreed to meet with the leaders of the council, and they brought in some representatives from Prevent as well. We all know what Prevent is. this part of the counterterrorism strategy. And it was actually quite interesting because, and I'm not advocate for Prevent at all, our organisation is very clear on our position against Prevent. But the Prevent team here in Birmingham, they said when this kicked off, we sent advice to schools saying, you need to create a space where children can, speak freely about this issue. We gave guidance to schools where they said anyone who's wearing a Palestine flag or have a little badge or a little whatever, it's perfectly fine. It's not a Prevent referral. And they said that we had, this is from the 7th of October up until last Friday when we They said we had 9 referrals to prevent. But that doesn't mean, but none of them went through. So what happens is the case goes, the school being scared, oh, this kid's got Palestine flag on, we've got to refer him to prevent. And prevent bat it away saying, this isn't a prevent issue. What are you coming to me for? Right? Because they know that they're wasting their... So we told them your prevent referral scheme is a problem. The people don't understand. Parents or schools are quick to throw people up there. And they said, yeah, we're batting them away. I said, we don't need that stigma. In any case, they said, and they read our advice. This is from Men's advice, again, you can find out in resources. And they said, when we read that, we said, your advice is actually pretty similar to ours, even though we've not read theirs, we haven't seen it. And what we're doing is calling for common sense approach. So as you can see there, it's about ensuring a respectful school environment where people are encouraged to have diverse opinions, encourage positive expression. So if someone wants to, there was one school where, not in this time, but last time, there's always a last time when it kicked off in Palestine, Israel, where the students wanted to kind of show some solidarity with Palestine. So one student came with a scarf. It's a bit big and whatever, yeah. But they kicked up a fuss because the school wanted to take it off them. And their friends got together and started to say, you know what, we took the scarf off you, watch what we're going to do. They went into the school, they went into the toilets and they started to draw Palestinian flags on tissue paper, and they started posting it all around the school. So the school, being very scared of this topic, thought that they'd flushed this example of expression by taking the flag, and all they'd done was create this wave of expression, yeah. And then until the school saw sense and they gave them a bit of space to air their concerns and stuff. In any case, especially teenagers, my kids aren't teenagers yet, but I was a teenager once and we dealt with them, right? Now is when they kind of push back against authority, want to express themselves and things like this. So the idea is to create a space for positive expression and that they facilitate informed discussions, that they provide understanding and address sensitivities, recognizing the sensitivities that Jewish and Muslim students might have is incredibly crucial. There are some schools where, there are Jewish students and things like this, and the idea is not to create an antagonistic space, we understand that, but the idea is that for parents or the school to actually create a space. And upholding non-partisanship and accuracy. So the school can not have a position, but still maintain a space for children to say what needs to be said, or feel that they can be, they can express their particular positions, and obviously encourage democratic engagement. Yeah, the idea is that we want people to kind of be able to express themselves, to have an opinion, and to be able to air it. But unfortunately, that's not always the case, and we are seeing cases referred to. Organisations like the Islamophobia Response Unit coming to us at MEND saying, listen, our school's doing this, our kid's been put under detention. There are some schools, there's one school near here who everything that they do, everything they have, everything they put on a child has the school badge on it. Yeah? Maybe even the underwear, I don't know. Everything's got the school badge on it. And so what they do is they say, if they see a badge, what they say is, oh, the badge, it falls foul of our uniform policy. Technically, they're right, yeah? And there's another screenshot I saw where a school was advising their teachers, because some teachers started they sent complaints to the designated safeguarding lead within the school, saying that, listen, this kid was drawing the Palestinian flag on their books. So they're actually kind of raising this issue. And thankfully, the safeguarding lead was aware and said, there's no problem with the Palestine flag. If you want to give them detention, you can't give them detention for having a Palestine flag, but for not doing the schoolwork that they're expected to do, right? So there are some ways you have to kind of be mindful of these things, and schools are being advised to look at their policies, behavior policies, uniform policies, and if there's anything in there that talks about expression or something like this, or violating some kind of, then they can hone in on that and use that as an excuse. As a parent, you might think that don't make sense, because 5 months ago, you sent my kid in wearing blue and yellow in support of Ukraine. Where's it? You're allowed to express, so the school is allowed to have these positions, but you're also allowed to respond. You're allowed to, and it's not a war of attrition. You're not here to kind of battle the school. You have to speak to the school. You're not there to go into battle with the school. You want a conversation with them. You want to say, here, we live in a time where children are allowed to tell you and express themselves against the gender they were born in, and you have to give them free rein? Don't you? That's what's happening in schools. And my son comes in wearing my daughter's got a stamp of Palestine on her finger that can easily be washed off after a day or two. And you're giving me hell? Where's this expression? Where's this? So you can call on the double standards and you can engage in dialogue. And that's always our advice. You engage in dialogue with the school. That antagonism causes problems. If it does get to it, then it gets to it. But that shouldn't be your first point of call. It's about speaking to people, getting a group of parents, speaking to some senior leadership team and saying, listen, we want to have a conversation about this. We want to become adults about this. We want to kind of make the school a place where they are allowed to have these kind of expressions and conversations. So these are some of the kind of like guidances that we kind of have about this particular issue. And like I said, it's not always roses. We've seen a spike in Islamophobic attacks since the 7th of October, when compared to this same time period last year, there's been a 5-fold increase in Islamophobic attacks. Palestinian Muslim families having graffiti on their doors, terrorists on the doors, sisters getting spat at, being called a terrorist. There's been graffiti on places, people have been abused and attacked. And we've seen an institutionalized response as well to some of these things, where staff within certain institutions are told, listen, don't express anything. We don't want to hear an utterance from you about this particular point. People are being, there's a real fear within people in employment about expressing an opinion or having some kind of discussion about this. If you do feel that this has happened to you, or if you have the school experience, or if you have the work experience, there is an organisation out there, an independent charity called the Islamophobia Response Unit. 100% charity. They provide you a caseworker. They look at your case. If it's an employment matter, they will give you, and you need it, they will give you a free lawyer. If you're a parent and you're a group of parents and you want to kind of deal with a particular school, or help write a letter, whatever it is, the caseworker will support you. The Islamophobia Response Unit, go to the iru.org.uk and you make your complaint online, and then they will contact you and give you a reference and sort you out. This exists. And there is also an organisation that deals with Prevent. So if there is an issue with Prevent, your child is referred to or something like this, then Prevent Watch is an organisation dedicated to support you. There's also obviously Cage, who do an incredible job, and they have really good advice on how school children should deal with any kind of problems. There's like a Q&A on their website. So, and what all this shows, alhamdulillah, is that the Muslim community is getting organised. Prior to this, it was just every man and his cat. Trying to kind of deal with this. But the idea is you create a society, an institution that support the community, that step up for you. MEND is one, and obviously I'm on there, I'm a staff member. But as an organisation, we have a limited number of staff across the region, but what we do have, and what we rely on, are volunteers. Our volunteers are the ones who know their community best. We have, so across the Midlands region that I'm responsible for, in Nottingham, in Leicester, in Coventry, in Walsall, in Birmingham, in Cardiff as well, we have volunteers. I don't know Newcastle, I don't know Leicester, but last year I spent most of my time there because of the whole Hindutva stuff. I'm from Yemen, I don't know the Hindutva, but I learned a lot. Yeah, the Gujarati community, but our volunteers there, they knew the scene. So when we as an organisation, as men, have our advice and our expertise, we need our volunteers on the ground to support, to have those connections, to get us into the masajid, to build those relationships even with counsellors and the police and all these kind of places. So that we educate and we teach. And I'll end there really, just to kind of say, if anyone is interested in volunteering, then come to me inshallah after. Or they can go onto the website, mend.org.uk, and volunteer, give your name and details, and then we'll take you on inshallah, and you can help support this important cause. And with that, we end today's presentation. Jazakumullah khair for your time. There is a chance for general questions or comments. If it's a specific case about a specific school or a specific incident, don't air it here. Maybe just catch me after, inshallah. Although I won't necessarily kind of deal with it, but maybe we can signpost to relevant people who can support. That's all from me, and the floor is yours, I guess.
Yes. Just a comment. You mentioned Zionists twice. I've noticed the main speakers, they're moving away from that label. So in case somebody starts saying it, we're kind of moving away from the Zionist term instead of trying to focus more on the actual legal terms and the
Barakallahu fiik. So the comment, I don't know if this is heard, the brother was kind of making a comment about the fact that I used the term Zionist a few times. And I appreciate the point. Zionism at one time was almost like a slur, something bad. But now politicians are saying, I'm a proud Zionist. They're saying, you know, what is Zionism?
Ideology.
Yeah, it's a supremacist ideology. In fact, the UN in the 1950s or 60s, they passed a resolution saying Zionism is racism. Yeah, and then, you know, and it got overturned. Absolutely, it's just political maneuvering. Yeah. Now, with that said, there's no problem in using the term Zionist. It is what it is. They call themselves that. Yeah. But there is a large swathe of the community who still understand that term to mean racist, to mean you know, a supremacist ideology, and I think like I said, there isn't generally an issue, but I understand your comment. I get that, you know, it doesn't even serve the cause as it used to, perhaps, maybe not, perhaps being diluted a lot, with them coming out now saying proudly that I'm a Zionist, and what are you going to do? It's no longer, it doesn't have that impact, I guess, but I appreciate that. I appreciate that comment. Yeah, totally.
My question is, how do you differentiate the flag with regards to the flag? Like, for example, the one I'm using, is this a Palestinian flag or a Hamas flag? Because you mentioned that anything that has to do with supporting Hamas in this country is against the law. So how do you say this by taking sure using the right?
Very good point. So the first thing I mentioned was about the first red line, which is not showing support for Hamas or not showing any kind of like affiliation or inclination towards promoting them. And the brother asked about the flags and even the checkered flag that we kind of all know and associate with the Palestinian scarf. And there is, at the moment, they don't own that. So Hamas isn't associated. It's always been connected with the Palestinian cause. Now there are attempts by the Israeli lobby to try to conflate the two, yeah. Just like they tried to kind of like conflate the one finger pose with ISIS. Remember, anyone who kind of has the Shahada finger. Oh, that's what ISIS and stuff. This is ours. Just like they're trying to kind of control the term jihad, yeah. Because if we're not involved in those discussions, then someone's going to take ownership of it. So the flag, the scarf, all these things, there is a challenge to it. There is an attempt to try and associate it with kind of extremism and these kind of things. But there is a groundswell of support against that particular narrative. But that is an attempt. So you can wear it proudly, your Palestinian scarf. You can wear it proudly around whatever. But there is one thing to kind of be mindful of. Whilst we are conscious of the flag and its support, what they're doing now is to say that while the flag in and of itself is no issue, or the flag, if you were to raise a flag perhaps next to a pro-Israel rally, then you could get arrested for breach of the peace or something like that, yeah? Or it could be deemed as anti-Semitism. Not because the flag is, but because you're waving the flag in a context or in an area where it's likely to antagonize and you're trying to kind of make a message, yeah? And they're going to read that as anti-Semitism. This is where there's a lot of grey and they're trying to conflate, right? Now, lakum dinukum waliyadin, you have your, you know, there was one rally in Solihull, I think, over the weekend, in Solihull Town Centre. There's one in Trafalgar Square as well, in London, about 3,000 turned up from those who support Israel. And the advice from the police has been saying free Palestine isn't an issue, saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free isn't an issue. But if you say these phrases next to, it's like someone who says, shouts fire. By itself it's nothing, but if you shout fire in a cinema or in a theatre, then you're going to get done for some kind of like, you know, because you're antagonizing the community or something like that, right? Now, and that's how they're kind of like playing it. So, a really good point. At the moment, And while it stays like this, and while we're still committed to the cause and our minds are on the prize and we kind of really are attuned to what's happening in Palestine, then we remain very confident with full audacity and with full conviction that these are our flags, these are our symbols, this is the symbol of the Palestinian resistance, the legitimate resistance, the Palestinian people is part of their culture, whatever it is. So that's where we stand at the moment.
Perhaps maybe this is the last question. Maybe.
I don't know if the sisters have a question.
If the sisters have questions, just shout to us. Do something. You mentioned that armed resistance is enshrined within the international humanitarian laws.
That's correct.
Which govern the conduct of war.
That's right.
And that's a valid form of resistance for an occupied people. And this, armed resistance is one of the dimensions of jihad.
Sure.
Now, of course, jihad is a very sort of charged term, and particularly now since, Suella Braverman, the UK Home Secretary, has brought this up, and has asked the police to look into, the chance of jihad in some of these protests. Not the main protest that took place, but a protest on the side. But the word jihad was shouted out. Now, obviously, this is all part of mixing issues and conflating issues and trying to, mix jihad with as a violent aspect of Islam. What advice does MEND have with regards to this particular word, and how should we tread carefully? What's the advice?
To be honest, I don't know what our talking point is on this particular time. But I mean, generally speaking, I would say that if we don't have control over our terms, then they will try to make it mean what they want it to mean. Yeah. And jihad, this is not the first time jihad has been used in this kind of way or challenged in this way. I mean, like I said, we've gone through 9/11. We've seen what happened with terms like jihad, especially. Yeah. And so everyone tries to kind of soften the term of the word, and we have to kind of say jihad is an Islamic term. It's a Quranic term. It's in our literature. It's a broad meaning, absolutely. But I know what I mean when I say it. Yeah. And so sometimes you want to make a point, but your point is lost because of a word. And so if you can say your point without using that word, because what they're going to do is they're going to catch on that word and they're going to take the conversation somewhere else, and you want to make a point over here. Yeah. And so I guess it's about hikmah. It's about knowing when to use the term. They might bring it up in a conversation. Your colleagues, jihad is coming up as a word. I was listening to a podcast and the police were talking about this concept. The Home Office was saying something about it. What is it? You have to kind of be able to, and this is where you got to teach the community about what the word is, what it means, how you can express what it means. And we obviously say that jihad, like I said, is a Quranic term. It has connotations that span not just inner struggle, but also physical, military struggle. And this is how it's always been used since the beginning of Islam. And we don't shy away from that. We talk about the fact that and we think that jihad is a noble act of Islam when it's done properly, with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, and the Messenger has kind of defined it. So there are rules to it, but we don't shy away from trying to kind of make sure that we set the terms for what the word means. And I think that's part of the challenge that we're going to have over the next weeks, wallahu a'lam. And not in fact.
Just on this point, the hospital bombing, the Israeli army briefing said it's an Islamic jihad bomb. They didn't even say Hamas. They used the term Islamic jihad bomb, which destroyed the hospital. So they are trying to hijack.
No, Islamic Jihad is a fighting group, is a militant group in Palestine. So whatever happened what happened in 7th of October wasn't just the Hamas-led operation. There was, I think, about 8 or 9 factions. There's quite a few militant kind of groups fighting, and so Hamas is kind of like the spearhead, I guess, or the biggest one, I guess, in the political authority in Gaza. In any case, so Islamic Jihad is the actual name of a military unit or a fighting unit in Gaza. So that's the point of that. Okay.
So, final point.
Yeah, follow
regarding children again.
Yes.
if they want to discuss this at school, what you're saying is that we have to see what the school says, or can they discuss the issue that we're having with amongst themselves in the playground? How do we stand with that? Will the parents be sort of approached by the school if children are found to be talking about it? Because I'll give you an example. We have a football club that we do, and we have a 5-minute reminder normally. And I just happened to be speaking to about 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 7, 8-year-olds. And this is one of the topics they raised. I didn't say anything. I just said, do you know how to make dua? And one of them says, yeah, I make dua for the Palestinian people, which is amazing, and how alert they are, which then got me thinking that this type of talk, should we be worried because they're talking about it, because we're sending them to school? Or should we sort of encourage that? Or what? How do we stand as parents doing that?
To be honest, kids sometimes say the craziest things, yeah. Even speaking last week with one of the people who kind of like oversees one of the government departments in the local government departments. He was a Muslim guy, and he said, my cousin, 7-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid, he's autistic and whatever, and he says openly, like, I hate the Jews. He's just a 7-year-old, like with autism. He just said it in school. He just blurts it out. Now the school were able, they knew he had autistic, and they didn't kind of like blow it up into kind of any kind of bigger thing than it was, and they knew who he was, and they called the parents in and they had a conversation, and it was absolutely settled. That's a normal. Kids, you can't necessarily control what they're going to say, and if the school kind of hears that there's a conversation, they will obviously call you. Now it might be that some schools actually then go and call Prevent, yeah, and so like I said, if that's the case, and if Prevent come to you, just an initial advice is that when Prevent come, it's completely informal and completely there's no coercion for you to kind of engage with them at all. It might be that they put so much pressure on you, and if they do, especially when your child's involved, then they can't speak to your child well. Yeah, so you got to get involved. But school children, kids speaking amongst themselves, you can't control that, and it's just a case of how the school attitude is to that will then kind of like deal with how you're going to respond to it. Unfortunately, you're not in that space while they're having a conversation about it. But by all means, have conversation with your children at home. There's a lot of resources. Is there like a WhatsApp group for the masjid?
Yeah, there is.
There is. I'll send you some things that you can send to everyone in the WhatsApp group. There's like booklets. There's some really kind of cool initiatives. There's one sister called Zainab Mian who writes a lot of Islamic books or books for children. And she did one recently with support from Cajun Men on how to speak to children about Palestine issue. So maybe if you guys have that, have a read through it. It's really kind of nicely done. Get the kids to read it with them, and then you can kind of have kids who are actually more attuned to the realities on the ground, and inshallah be sensible when they talk about it. Okay. I see some people already sleeping, so yeah.
Okay, inshallah, jazakallah.
Barakallah feekum. Jazakumullah khair for your time. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts your promise, makes all our efforts solely for His sake, inshallah, and that He accepts it from us, and that He grants support and victory to our brothers and sisters in Gaza, and that we see, inshallah, the liberation of Masjid al-Aqsa. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.